Hi everyone, my name is David and today we're going to discuss something that has come up recently in the day job concerning experiment design. And I'm going to talk about p-values. So we all know that traditionally when you run any kind of, for example, A-B experiment, you want to claim discovery when the p-value is below a certain conventional threshold, typically 0.05. And the reasoning is that this means that this is supposed to control the rate of false discoveries to 5% or less. And people ask me, well, doesn't that depend on how p-values are distributed, assuming that the null hypothesis is correct? And it turns out that it doesn't depend because the p-values under the null hypothesis will always be uniformly distributed between 0 and 1. And this might sound a little bit surprising. So it's actually very easy to prove mathematically, but instead of doing that, I'm going to show you some examples to convince you that this is true. So we're going to start by a traditional A/B test. So let's say we want to compare the means between two groups coming from, say, a normal distribution. So I'm going to simulate, say, 1000 values drawn from the standard normal distribution here. So this will, of course, look like the traditional bell curve that you all know. I'm going to generate a second group drawn from the same distribution but independent from A. And of course, the way you test whether the means are different is through the t-test. So t-test A and B. If you do this, you see p-value roughly 0.6, meaning that there's no evidence that the means are different, which is as it should be because these are drawn. I mean, this satisfies literally the null hypothesis. They are drawn from the same distribution. What I'm going to do, I'm going to repeat this procedure many times over and see how those p-values are distributed. So to do this, notice first that if I assign the result of this t-test to a variable t, then I have access to the p-values through this name list here, $p-value. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to first define a function which will compute the p-value for a new experiment. So I'm going to call this t-test and be a function and no arguments, we don't really need those. And I'm going to essentially repeat what I did just now. I'm going to assign the result of the t-test to t, sorry, and I'm going to return the value of the p-value. So I'm assigning this function. Let's see that it works. Okay, I can run this several times over. It gives me different numbers each time. So now I'm gonna execute this a large number of times. And well, you know me, one of the best ways to do this, I think, is through the replicate function. So I'm going to assign the results of this to a vector, replicate, say 1000 times, and then I tell it what's the expression I want to evaluate over and over again. So that was super fast. Let's see, yes, there are 1000 values here. And if we look now at the distribution of these values, you can see that the p-values are effectively uniformly distributed between 0 and 1. So this means that under the null hypothesis, which in this case means that the two groups are independent and drawn from the same distribution, the p-value can be anything between 0 and 1 with equal probability, which means that with probability 5%, it will be lower than the conventional threshold of 0.05, which means that, yes, indeed, under the null hypothesis, you will have an exact 5% false discovery rate. Now, Does this depend on the kind of test that you do? Is this a special quirk of the t-test? Well, actually, no. This is going to be true for any statistical test that reports a p-value that you do. And again, there are some reasons for it. I'm not going to show it. It's quite easy to figure out. Actually, I figure it's more interesting and more fun to simulate it ourselves. So we're gonna do the same exercise now, but now using the test for differences in proportions. And this is of course the what is the prop test, I think. Yeah, this is a test available in the stats package, which tests whether two or more proportions come from the same underlying distribution. So what I'm gonna do, just to give you an example, I'm gonna say, let's say we have 4 populations of patients, and let's assume that the size of each population is uniformly drawn between, say, 100 and 200, let's say. Patients, num. Okay, so there's a little technicality here. You'll see why, but I need to cast this to integers, otherwise there's a call to our binom which is not going to work. And so now let's say that out of these patients, roughly 10% are going to be smokers. So I'm gonna simulate this with our binom. So n is actually going to be the same size as the number of elements in patients. So I could just type 4 here, but I'm gonna be a bit pedantic and say n equals length patients. Size is going to be, well, patients, and I need to specify the probability of each patient being a smoker. I'm going to be a bit pessimistic here and say that 10% of all patients are smokers. If I run this, I get the value for smokers. You see here 14, 14, 12, 8. And I can now do prop test on this. I think it's the number of successes first, and the number of elements second. And if I do this, I get a p-value of 0.8. So there's no evidence that these 4 populations have unequal proportions of smokers. So we're going to do the same way now. We're going to wrap this into a function and call the function 1000 times. So p of prop into the function. I'm going to basically, I can just copy paste this. Patients as integer, smokers, and again I'm going to assign the result of calling prop test to p, and I'm going to report the p-value here. Okay, so this defines the function. Let's see if it works. Okay, looks good. And now I'm gonna do the same thing I did earlier. So p prop values replicate 1000 times p prop. No, wait, that did not. Oh, did it work? P prop. Oh, yes, it did. Okay, cool. And let's see. Let's look at the distribution now. All right. As you can see, to a very good approximation, the distribution of the p-values come from the test for unequal proportions is also uniformly distributed between 0 and 1. So all this goes to show that it doesn't matter what test you're doing. If the null hypothesis holds, and this is an important point, if the null hypothesis holds, then your p-value will be uniformly distributed between 0 and 1, meaning that your false discovery rate will be exactly equal to the threshold you set for claiming discovery, as it should be.